I don't think that altruism, in the sense that it is defined in the dictionary and the consensus for what that concept is supposed to mean and refer to, is honest. I don't think it actually even exists in that particular sense. I mean, the dictionary defines altruism as a noun, the belief in or practice of disinterested and selfless concern for the well-being of others. So I think it can appear that altruism is existing in this particular sense. But to me, there is always, or at least it seems, that there is always more going on some kind of a fundamental or more subconscious level. And I think that we have to acknowledge that people don't always do things for the reasons they say they do them. We also have to maybe even acknowledge and realize that sometimes the reasons why they themselves think they do things might not actually be those reasons. They might be indulging in self-deception. So even what they think motivates or drives them, or what they desire from a certain situation, may not in fact be the case or have any fundamental value or merit or basis to them. And so, I mean, we see this with athletes all the time, where athletes maybe one day come to a realization and say, you know what, I actually realized that part of the reason I had problems in big matches is that I was more motivated by fear of failure than my desire to win and my quest for the trophy. Even though, maybe in past interviews, I said the same things as everyone else. It's all just about winning. I'm not afraid of my opponent. I think I can do this. I regurgitated the same rhetoric, but maybe I realized it was something else and I changed my philosophy. I mean, it's also worth acknowledging that people can be gaining something, even if it's conceptual, without it being visible or quantifiable by external metrics, which is where I think a lot of their concepts of altruism come from what people think that is worth being gained, etc. So, for example, you don't financially gain anything, or you even lose financially, you lose resources, time, other things that are clearly of some value in life. Now, a large problem, I think, with this topic of altruism is the notion that it is somehow good, or it is better to do things altruistically, to do things which don't benefit you but do help someone else. And in this sense, we understand the basic concept is you're helping everyone, you're helping the world, you're helping other aspects of life, you're sharing things, you're sharing your wealth, your time, your efforts to help the other person. And in that sense, it's good, and there's almost a universal sense that this is a positive thing that you're doing. My problem with this is it seems to ignore even basic animal and human psychology. There is nothing wrong with helping someone in a way that also benefits you. Or if you find, through thinking it through, like I'm trying to outline here, that it turns out you are actually in some way benefiting, that doesn't invalidate the whole process. In fact, I actually think it makes the whole process more logical, makes it more believable that you would act this way, and makes it less of this saintly thing that you're doing that makes you a special person, because that obviously ties into aspects of ego if you think that indeed is what's happening here. So I don't think there's anything wrong with someone benefiting from helping someone. I mean, we can find ways to help each other and to benefit at the same time, whether that's what I'm going to address now, not necessarily material aspects, or benefiting materially. Because I think both extremes are bad. I think being entirely selfish and never helping anyone has clear negatives, and clear negatives to the ecosystem you're in, and the society you're in, and families you're in, and relationships that you're in. But I also think claiming to be totally altruistic and seeming never wanting to gain anything materially, or even wanting to deny that you enjoy it in any way or get anything out of it, and that you're just putting all this work up on your back and making yourself a workhorse for the world, I think there's something fucked up about that. I think psychologically or emotionally, that person probably has some issues they're repressing, or that they need to deal with, or some traumas that are playing out in the psychodrama of their mind in what they're choosing to do with their life. And so I hope on either end of the equation, people would at least look at what they're doing and question whether or not that's a reasonable way to live your life. Because obviously we know people can ruin their lives thinking they have to suffer and they have to only help others and they can't be allowed to help themselves, and almost this kind of self-hatred or guilt if they receive any pleasure or resources, or shame that they have extra resources and time and wealth and skills and that someone else doesn't. I mean, I feel like altruism, particularly in the case of charity work or helping others with opportunities or giving others resources, even if it's just knowledge and your time, I feel like some of that comes from guilt at how the world is, and that there's a lack for other people, and the sense that it's unfair, why do I have it and they don't? I think assuaging this guilt is part of what motivates people to do this. I think also there's the fact that we have to acknowledge that sometimes people's personal trauma that they've experienced in their life or personal, just life experiences are what motivates them and drives them to want to take these actions to kind of redress something to do with that, or something connected with it, or to battle those past demons and think they can outrun them in some sense, or to try and overcome the difficulties they faced and help other people overcome same difficulties. So in some sense, we already see how their own life is playing into it, and sure, they're helping others, but maybe they're doing it to battle their own psychological issues or things that haunt them in some particular sense and try and exercise those demons. When you help someone, on some level, I think you nearly always gain yourself. I mean, first of all, on the most basic, material level, they might return the favor one day. It also might make you feel good. You might feel as though, I did something good, or for today at least I did something good, I don't have to worry about the rest of the day, or now I know that I'm helping out in this scenario. It might give you an ego boost. You might think, I am good, I'm someone who helps people. You know what, I didn't even seem to appear to gain anything from this, so I'm a great person. In fact, I'm better than these other selfish people. The ego aspect might kick in. Also, let's be real, giving other people pleasure can provoke pleasurable feelings from you in response. You can enjoy that. I mean, I would hope most people in a sexual environment can come to this realization. Otherwise, they'll be incredibly selfish lovers, I would imagine. There's the fact that when you help people, they might go on to do things which you can enjoy, either from afar or directly, or work that you can benefit from. Maybe they do some work which you then have an idea from, or builds into something that you do in some particular sense, whether directly or indirectly. I know in my own life, that's one of the reasons why I've enjoyed helping a lot of people, is because in many cases, they're people I think are brilliant, or I want to give them resources to do something that I think is great, or I might have an idea in response to what they then do, or I just want to see more of what they do. There's something selfish, there's something that I gain, there's something beneficial to me in all aspects of this that the other person might not think is there because you can't see it externally, but I can see that I'm gaining from it, and I don't see any problem with admitting as much. I don't think it's something to be ashamed of. So it's not that altruism can't exist. It's just that if it does, I don't think almost any of these examples that I've given here are actual altruism in the sense that people would think of it in the consensus of what the concept would be. I mean, it just seems incredibly unlikely and fantastically rare if that kind of altruism does actually exist and doesn't in some way benefit the person, whether that's just be taking away some of the negatives of how they emotionally feel and connect with the world and identify themselves as a person. I find it hard to really think that. I mean, maybe there are people who've done so much meditative work and these sorts of like spiritual advancement or whatever that they really do just not identify even as an individual being in this sense. Maybe that's possible. I haven't had direct experience of that myself with those people, so I can't really say whether that's bullshit or not. I leave it out there that maybe it's possible, but I think it will be very, very rare. I mean, even in examples where from the outside you can't really see any benefit. So obvious examples to me would be there's a famous story that Joseph Campbell tells about a man, I think it was a police officer, where there's a man hanging off a cliff and there are two police officers, and the first police officer goes to help the man up, but as he's trying to help the man up, the man like is grasping onto him, because he's so afraid to die, and that first police officer starts to go over the cliff as well. So the second police officer instinctively, without even just stopping and thinking and doing, with no hesitation, just dives forwards and grabs his partner's hand, and he hands it, and amazingly, obviously he could have gone over as well and died, he actually manages to grab so that all of them are all in a line being held, and he manages to pull them up and they're saved. And in this moment, as is a classic example, you would think, what a great act of altruism, like he could have died himself doing it. Some people might even think that's so dangerous, you could have killed yourself, which is certainly the case, by the way. But even in this moment, the point of the story that he gets to is, the officer tells this story, he says that in that instant, I didn't see them as my partner, I didn't see them as that guy going off the cliff. All of a sudden, I had this sense that we are just the same thing, we are one, and so to let them die is to let me die. And so I reached out and I grabbed them. Can you see how, as he's explaining that sounds like it transcends all personality and ego and division? It does in a sense, but in a sense, by making us all one, you are helping yourself. You can see how you benefit in that particular sense. Even if it's just conceptually, there's something to that. Same, I would say, goes for the scenario of when soldiers, there's all these stories. I mean, some of them, by the way, are clearly bullshit and clearly made up by the army and probably cover some fucked up shit. But ignore that if you want and you want to live in a naive fairy tale world. But there are stories, I'm sure, are legitimate, of soldiers who have jumped onto grenades that have saved some of their some of their fellow soldiers. In this particular scenario, I would say that's probably the same thing happening. They have such affection for these guys, or they acknowledge in that instant that these are people. I mean, the identity politics means they probably think they're like me and he's like them, and that they're willing to save this person to help the greater good of the troop and the army, etc. So you can see how there's a positive to that, but there's also an aspect to which that some person in some sense gain, even though in this particular example, this last one, they do die. They are gone after that, or they face great physical harm. And so we applaud them in some sense, but let's not be ridiculous and pretend like they were just some saint, some angel sent from heaven who didn't act in a human manner with a human body and a mind and desires and drives like all the rest of us. That would be kind of ridiculous to do so. And I definitely don't like spreading stories like that to children and people in different situations where they believe that shit's really going on. I think that's kind of fucked up in a sense. So, in a sense, even in these situations, you are in some sense helping yourself, or what you identify with or relate with as yourself. Now, the reason why I think to ignore this altruism has any kind of selfish nature to it, or any benefit that you can gain from it, is because I think it's dangerous. I mean, it ignores what drives us, how our brains seem to work and function and decide what we should do next. There's nothing wrong with gaining something yourself, even indirectly, from helping other people. Absolutely nothing wrong. So let's just be honest about what's going on and not sell people a line of bullshit that you're some special, superior person or better than others, or this is what everyone should aim to do and never gain for themselves.